tricky things about this one. But first, a little bit of background on the piece. I believe it was written in 1938, 1939, late 1930s. And it was added to the beginning of a set of two pieces by Barrios that he had lumped together, which are now the second and third movements of this piece. So he added this one later and dedicated it to his wife. There's a little bit of confusion about the origins of the piece and why it was written. Some people said it was nostalgia about his life with his wife that had passed away. But then there's also records saying that she was with him at the time of his death. So it's a little bit confusing, but the title of this movement is Preludio Saudade, which in Portuguese that word means nostalgia. And so I think you'll hear some nostalgic elements throughout this piece. So it was also originally written in two voices, meaning if you look at the music, it would have been written in two different staves, but here we have it combined into one, which is in its most popular form. And let's just start out with a couple of things that are important to mention here. So the most important voice to bring out is definitely going to be that top voice. And pardon me while I bring this over into so I have the score in front of me here to reference. The most important note to bring out in this line is going to be that first note and the second to last one you see in that measure up on the 14th fret, that F sharp. So if you're playing this on an electric guitar or an acoustic with a cutaway, it's actually a lot easier. On a classical, it's not too bad either, but that 14th fret is kind of high, right? So the right hand pattern in this piece stays the same throughout most of the piece, with exception at the end. So that's just going to be like this. We're going to be starting with our A finger, right, our ring finger, and moving down to our thumb, and then back up to the A finger, and then that last note of the measure, you're going to have that open B again, which goes back to our middle finger, and then we're going to go back to that same pattern again. So A, M, I, P, I, M. A, M, A. So I have the A and the M written in there in the score. The rest is kind of self-explanatory if you just look at the shape of the line through the tab there, right? So we have the 14th fret, open, 11th, 12th, 11th. And I'm sort of unfamiliar to reading and writing in tab. It's been a long time since I did that a lot. But in this piece, it kind of helps you also see the shapes of the lines, so especially in the beginning. So as I was saying, this first F sharp in that last, second to last note. In this case, it's an F sharp again, but it's not always that. So that's why I want you to pay attention to that. If you have that score and you've printed it out or whatever, you can highlight those sections so you know for sure to keep that, the melody. Make sure that's the melody that's being brought out. So let's just try that. Let's play this shape, right? Second finger on D, first finger on that F sharp, and then our pinky on that other F sharp. And we have the open B in the middle. So let's try this. We're going to play this loud, and then the rest really quiet. And let's just repeat this measure. And if you'd like, you can add a little vibrato in here, which is really hard to do while you're holding other notes, so it's worth practicing before you have everything else and you have the whole piece to work through. Okay, so again, this cannot be emphasized enough, bringing out this first note and that second to last. And I'm just repeating that first measure. And right now I'm using free stroke for everything, which is meaning I'm plucking the string and I'm not resting on the next string, okay? I'll explain why I mentioned that now, but I'll explain in just a little bit. And you know, if you're having a tough time bringing out that melody at the top, I know it's kind of tough sometimes. What you can do is focus on making the other notes as quiet as possible. Almost make them disappear. Like, I'll show you. And And usually, if you try to exaggerate like that, that's what gets you that real separation. Without fail, that usually works. In fact, when I ask some of my private students to do something like this, separating melody and accompaniment, and I say, okay, make that accompaniment really, really quiet. Usually it starts out like this. And they're almost the same volume. Of course, to us, we hear the difference and we're thinking the difference. But in order for the audience to really hear that difference, you have to make it extreme. So that's my number one advice throughout this piece is make the separation between melody and accompaniment great so that it's very obvious what the melody is. And by the way, I forgot to mention part of the story. It's said that these high notes here in this piece are the bells that he was hearing far away from the church. So, take that with a grain of salt, but I'm just looping this here. Okay, and now I'll discuss one other way to bring out this melody other than just making the accompaniment quiet, and that is to use what's called a rest stroke on the first string. Like this. I'm using my A finger, my ring finger, and I'm pulling it through the string, and I'm resting it on that second string. Okay? So, when we do that, we can get quite a bit of force on that string, kind of infinite, how hard we can press down into the guitar. And that helps bring the light out. But one thing you don't want to allow that to do is move your whole hand. Like, you don't want to do this. Because then it's really difficult to hit the other strings correctly. And also, what ends up happening is you hit one too loud and then everything is a little uneven. So if you use rest stroke, make sure it's just from within your finger. Or maybe a little bit of hand movement, but not this. Okay, it's another way you see a lot of people playing this, but it really makes it hard to control your fingers. Okay, so we've got that across. Maybe you can practice just doing a little bit of rest stroke here. And if you're not here yet, don't worry, just repeat that first measure. Like I'm doing now. Okay? Let's move on to the next measure. So we're starting first, and what happens here is your second finger and your first just reverse. So instead of it being like this, they're this. So second finger on that G and your first finger on that C sharp. And then your fourth finger moves to your third here on that 12th fret. Then you reach up to that 15th fret, that G, and then you're back to the original chord, the original arpeggio there. Okay, so a lot of times this G, if you're on an acoustic or nylon string here, it's hard to get it to ring. So once again, you're brought into that reminder of make sure the accompaniment stays quiet. All right, so let's try that again. And staying on the tips of your fingers really helps here because there's all these open B's, and if you're not on the tips of your fingers, you'll have this happening. Muting. You hear how that sounds? That's barely the other side of my first finger just barely touching that next second string, that B string, and it'll mute the note. So this is a great practice for staying on your fingertips. Okay, so we're moving up through this, moving to the 12th fret here, a little bit of a reach here to the 15th, and we're back to that first chord position. Then a little bit of a change here. We have, a D and a G here at measure 6. And then we have this cool little shape here. So Had to find it for a second. Okay, so I'm using 2, 3, 1 here, and that's coming from this. So that's a little bit tough of a change, okay? Really worth practicing the transition from measure 6 to 7 really, really slow. So watch how I do this. I'm utilizing this open string that we always have here as the last note of the measure I'm utilizing that to shift my second finger up to that first string. And this position is particularly difficult to get, not if you just, throw your hands on the guitar and play it, but coming from there, it's hard because you have to stay on the tip of your finger, and it's really hard to get every one of those notes to ring without muting one accidentally. So don't worry if you don't get it right away. I would just encourage you to practice it nice and slow. And now we're going to the 14th fret at measure 8. Yeah, so, this is a really nice moment here, where we have the 14th fret, then we have F sharp, A, G, and C sharp. It's this sort of shape. It's really jazzy. So, coming from this 12th fret spot at the E in the melody. That's another really hard moment. And we have no open B there to save us and help us transition to that D at measure 9. Okay, so this is all about finger placement and getting it right. I'll demonstrate hopefully and show you how this sort of looks in slow motion. Measure 7, measure 8, measure 9. Pinky's going to move up to that 12th fret. And we're in the same shape here as in measure 8, except we're on that E instead of that F sharp. So just take a look at that. Measure 8 to 10, measure 8 and 10. It's that same shape, except we're going from that F sharp to the E. And the cool thing is we go back to that F sharp, which you're probably expecting this, but moving to A sharp there, G and C sharp. Okay, so now we're at measure 12, and we have D, open B, F sharp, and D. So this is easy enough here, but this is the first moment where we're changing that pattern. Oh, actually not quite. We have a couple of moments where we change that pattern, but we're always staying with our ring finger on the first string. So we have here our first open D, right? So we have G, then our thumb, index, middle, index, thumb. And the best way to do this is write your own fingerings over those notes to help you remember. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to remember these types of things. So, whatever fingering ends up working best for you, write it down and write notes to yourself in the music. That's a really nice step in improving. Okay, so measure 13. We're just going to slide down one fret, measure 14. So we're off of that open D, but we're bringing that open B back in. So now our second finger on the G, our third finger on that F, and our first finger on C sharp. Lost my spot. Okay, measure 15. Right. So this is one of the harder shifts. We have this, measure 15. Then we have to replace our first finger with our pinky. Okay, so this is a worthwhile spot to practice. Let's do this together. Measure 15, 9th fret, we're here. And we have to do this replacement. And the key to doing this is to try not to make this sound like this. You see, we have that really short C sharp sticking out. What you want to try to do is begin the shift while your first finger is still there. So you have this really smooth transfer of fingers. So. Okay, let's try that again. Maybe you can take your time and find that chord. Let's make a little exercise out of that. And that's something useful to do when you're working on this type of music, is create exercises for yourself to simplify the difficulties that you're going through in the piece and just bring it to an exercise that you can move everywhere and just sort of master before you actually try to play it with all the other complications that are involved. So I'll show you. I'm going to just play C sharp, and I'm going to connect it to that C sharp with another finger. So pick any note. Here we go with B, the 7th fret. And I'm just replacing that first finger with that 4th, and trying not to do this, right? This is the wrong way to do it. Or, right? That's da, da, instead of, you see how they connected there? And the way I'm doing this, I'm bringing my pinky close to my first finger before lifting it. You see it's traveling this way, and then it's replacing it. Right? It's kind of like a relay race. After this pinky approaches, boom, the first finger shoots off. Okay, so let's try it there at measure 15 to 16. And you know what? It's okay if you try it first without playing the other right hand finger, or the other plucks in the right hand. You can just have your fingers nearby and try it. And just do open strings if you want. Not even worry about playing the right notes. That's a nice step. You have this repeating, C sharp, C sharp, C sharp. Just like in the music. Okay, let's do that again. First finger, first, 4th. Oh, that wasn't the best. Let's try that again. First finger, first, 4th. That's a lot better. So that's what I'm going to try to get in the music here at measure 15 to 16. Oops. Okay, pretty happy with that. Let's try it again. Okay? What's important to know is a lot of times we jump around the music we're playing and we just try to play the chords all at the same time. Like, we try to land all of our left hand fingers down at the same moment. But that's not how it works in this piece and in a lot of music. You really only want to set your fingers down once it's their time to play, so that you have as smooth of a transition as possible and you're not hopping and muting all the notes in between. Right? If I did this, it's really hard to connect those notes because they're all hopping in between. And that's actually a situation where you're forced to set everything down at once. But when we have arpeggios and it's something like this, we don't want to do this, See, you get sounds like that. Oh. You hear instead of doing one finger at a time. So that's what we're going to be working on here too. When we do this, I'm just moving my pinky, then my 3rd finger reaches out for that F sharp. And then my 1st finger for the F sharp up there, and then my middle finger comes down for that A sharp in measure 16. Okay, so moving onwards. Notice how everywhere else I'm also doing this. Even for the easier transitions like that one, to measure 17, I'm doing pinky, index, middle, ring. Pinky, index, middle, ring. I'm not just doing and trying to nail that. Okay, let's do that again. And you'll notice that everywhere. We're moving on to the next page here at measure 19. we're going to come into a bar chord here. So another one of those replacements, except this time we're doing the opposite. We're replacing our pinky with our index finger, and it's a bar chord at measure 19. So unfortunately there's a page turn there, maybe not for you all, or maybe not on the screen, but this is the position we're coming out of. But the good news is, from here, your first finger on that F natural, it's not really a big movement to that C sharp, right? It's not a huge movement. Let's try that one more time. So we're starting at measure 18. Right, not too bad. Let's do it slowly again. Notice this connection. And then now, we're only using our first finger, which is barred, and our second finger here for that F natural. So we want to get our pinky ready and extending out here to aim for that F sharp that we have at the beginning of the piece. Alright, so if it's not reaching out, this is what ends up happening. I'll show you. And you end up jumping there, like this. And a lot of times that's what happens, is you miss or you buzz, and it ruins that calm, nostalgic feeling, right? So I'm really careful during that stretch. So here, I use the fingering 2 and then I bar with my first finger, right there at measure 20. However, if you want to do 4, 3, 1, 2, and that's easier for you, I think it's harder, honestly, or 4, 3, 1, 1. But for me, my second finger is so much easier there. I just feel like this is a big stretch between my 3 and 4, and it's really hard to stay on the fingertip of my third finger with that big of a stretch. So once again, second finger there on the A sharp, first finger on that C sharp and the F sharp there, and then pinky on the high F sharp. Okay, so where are we? Measure 20. Then, boom, we're back to the beginning, which is measure 21. Okay, so that's the first measure of the piece again. So it's actually kind of a first ending and a second ending, except this first ending of the piece is very short. So I'll show you where it changes that. We have this all again, which is the same as the beginning, like I said. That's measure 22, same as the beginning. Measure 23, same as the beginning. 24, same as the beginning. Okay. That's all the same as the beginning all the way through measure 25, but at measure 26, we have something different happening. Okay. So now it's going to take us towards the end of the piece. This is another difficult part of the piece. None of that repeated section is so difficult. But this is taking us to a more difficult spot. So let's just talk about what to do real quick in that repeated section. So for measure 21 up until 25, we have all that same material from the beginning. So the question is, we have this, these 4 measures we're working with here. How to play this in a way that says, oh, this is the beginning again, but it's not telling you the same story, right? Because when we're making music, we're trying to tell some sort of story, and especially if there's nostalgia involved in the title of the piece, what do we do when we come back to something like that? Maybe when we're talking or when we're thinking. If we keep on thinking back to something, it means something, right? Maybe there's more anger there, or maybe there's more passion, or maybe there's a sadder side to that memory, or a happier side to that memory. Whatever it is, something is different about that second time you hear it. So if you play it just as you did at the beginning, then it doesn't really mean much. It just sort of shows that there's nothing new that you thought of to do there. So I just wanted to share a few ideas that I had there, and feel free to do whatever you think is appropriate there, or whatever your feeling is coming from the music. So one thing to do really, that's I think is really nice, is you're coming from the measure before, which is really powerful, leading you back to here. I think it's really nice to get really quiet here. Maybe it's a sad, it doesn't sound like happy nostalgia there. It sort of sounds like a sad memory or a remembrance of sorts, right? So I like getting quieter there. Right after measure 20, we have this little peak. And just sounding a little bit more fragile. And maybe taking a little bit more time after each one of those melody notes. So watch this. Instead of this at the beginning, we're doing this. Right? Taking a little bit more time there. Okay, so now we're at measure 26. And we have some big stretches and some bar chords coming up, so it takes a little bit of practice, but don't worry, there's plenty of things to practice, like the very beginning of the piece and separating that melody and accompaniment that makes it really worthwhile, before getting to the hard stuff. As far as left-hand hard stuff, we really have to master that separation of melody and accompaniment before we ever worry about this stuff. So if that's where you're at, maybe you can take some notes and remember some things that I mentioned in this section, but just internalize that beginning stuff that I mentioned first. And by the way, if you have any questions about any of the things I'm mentioning here, or classical guitar, this piece by Agustín Barrios, please leave them in the chat, because I'll be getting to it at the end of this. So please do that, because if you wait till right at the end, it's really hard to get to them all. Okay. So we're at measure 26. We have some of these harder stretches. That one is a little bit difficult because it's hard to just bar those first strings, that D and the G there on the fourth and third. And you can't do a full bar really on a classical guitar. It's really hard to do that here. Yeah, I almost buzzed by accident. So I just do a partial bar, which is I'm kind of just using the tip joint of my first finger here to press those strings. I'm not laying my entire finger down. So you can kind of see how it's just the tip joint of my left hand bent to there. So I'm going to do this again. Measure 26. Then easy enough, it's the same thing, just 2 frets down. Except it is a pretty big stretch. We have this. Okay? So feel free to give yourself plenty of time after you play that F sharp again to stretch to that new position. And then we just sort of move our pinky down. Another sort of difficult thing about that is we want this connection to be nice and smooth, but it's a pretty hard stretch to use our third finger there. So I just lift my pinky and move it there. But I try to make that shift kind of fast so that it doesn't sound like this, right? But still all very legato and connected and not distracting. So again, measure 26, measure 27, moving down, and then pinky just moves all the way to that D. Okay, measure 29, this is easy enough. We have that diminished harmony, we have that open G. Another familiar shape, you have a lot of these little bars with just the tip joint here, right? So barring the third and fourth string. Okay, so we're going somewhere else here. I'll just play from measure 26 onwards. So we have this. Oops. Wrong spot there, sorry. Measure here, 26, 27, 28 coming up here, 29, 31. Okay, and then now we move on to this. I really love this spot because we have this lowest note in the melody there so far. So I really like to get quiet here. Right, so moving from here, this B, we sink down to this G, and it sounds just like letting go, right? It sort of sounds like releasing all that tension. And then it sort of sounds like contemplation here to me, right? So you have deciding to let it go, and then contemplation, right? This here is just open E, open B, and then playing two notes on the 12th fret, that G and B, sorry, that G and D. Sorry. So we go up here. Okay, so important note here is that we're moving from this at measure 33, two of these, this G and D here, and then at measure 30 we have 35, we have this, right? That C sharp is interesting and special coming from here. So I make sure I bring out that C sharp a little bit. Final page, we have another open E again. Then here, I like playing this F sharp on the second string, so you'll see that in the tab. You know, it's possible to play it here, but I think it adds so much color, and you do a rest stroke there on that second string. It's so beautiful. And we have that same shape in the left hand where we have our little half bar with the tip joint of our finger. Okay, so that little half bar, same thing here, except we're going to grab the 5th string. Easy enough, we transition here to an open string. So the harmonic motion kind of speeds up here, right? We're progressing through chords faster than normal because typically, throughout the earlier part of the piece, one chord is taking up an entire measure. Whereas here we have this, you know, one chord per measure. But now we have this. So, oops, it's this. Two chords per measure here. So you can tell we're coming closer to the ending. And once again, oh, here, importantly, you have the melody happening on every downbeat rather than the downbeat in the second to last note, as it is everywhere else in the piece. Like 2 measures back, in measure 38, you have melody again, right? Then open E, F sharp, G. So that's all on the downbeats. At measure 40, beat 1, beat 2, and then measure 41. So that's really important to note. Same here, measure 41, beat 2. Okay, and then we let that B ring, and then this is like the cadenza of a piece, you know, the part where you're wrapping it all up. It's very improvisatory, and there's little scales and runs. It's really beautiful. So take some freedom here. This is measure 41, now 42. Oh, let's do that again. So for measure 43, here. Again, the melody note, you want to hold that D for a second. Up to the 12th fret, G, B, and then we're just sliding down with our 4th and 3rd finger. That's the way I find it to be easiest here, because if you don't do that, it's really hard to do this. So, I don't know, this is just so simple. 3, 4, sliding down, 4, 3. That's right at the end of measure 44, intro into 45. Open E, okay? The way actually I would do that would be open 1, 3, 4, 1, 4. So that you're ready here for this bar chord. Okay, so again, for measure 44, okay, a little bit tricky of a fingering. So again, 1 on that C sharp in measure 45, A sharp here, the only note that's an accidental in this measure. Then 4, 2, 4, 1, 3, 1, 4. Right, we're just in a B minor chord. Okay, you could do this pull off here as notated. Then with your right hand, you have this. How to do that? These little artificial harmonics. You have to keep this bar to this B minor chord. Then you touch your finger here at the 19th fret, okay? So right on the fret, and with your other finger here, you can either use your middle finger, although in general, the finger that you can get furthest away from that finger that just touches the string is better. I typically use my ring finger. It's kind of the nice balance between control and distance. Pinky I don't have as much control of, so it's harder to do. I use my ring finger, and also a lot of people use their thumb. But still, when you use your thumb, it's not as far as a distance as your ring finger. So I do this. Okay, we're just touching, barely touching the string. We're not pressing the note. We're just touching right on that metal fret. We're touching the string, but right above the metal fret. And as soon as we pluck with that ring finger, we're coming off immediately. So you get this bell-like sound. Then you'll see written here, kind of tricky, you have 2 harmonics, just normal harmonics where you hold your finger over the 7th fret there. And then you have 2 notes that are harmonics on the 12th fret. So you have 2 on the 7, 2 on the 12. It's like this. Right? So let's try that again. Basically the way I do this is I have my first finger halfway in between these 2 strings, so it's easy to just do this. Maybe you can try that. And then with your pinky, same thing. Between those 2 frets. I'm not doing this. It's hard to be accurate. I'm just touching tip of my finger on the 3rd string and just letting the fatty part of my finger hit that 2nd string. And just practicing coming off of both of those individually really quickly. And then the stretch and doing them together. And I'm using my thumb, index, middle, A, all together. You have tons of time to shift to this next chord. You can also do it as a rolled chord. Any of these you can play rolled. Okay, so again, I typically roll that 2nd chord. And then this last one, we're just shifting our 3rd and 4th finger up, and with our 2nd finger playing that low B. So you can roll that or do this. It's a real statement to end it with that block chord played all together instead of rolled. So, I hope this answers a lot of the questions that you might have about this piece, and gave you a nice introduction to it, along with just some helpful fingerings and all. But there's going to be lots of moments here that are not conquerable on the first try. So definitely don't worry about taking your time with this piece. Master, like I was saying in the beginning, master that first measure, master the second measure, and then move it on to the rest of the piece to where the left hand gets a little complicated. So if you have questions, please leave them in the comments now. I know that there are a few already, so I'm going to go ahead and get to those. Thank you so much for watching. Each week I'm going to be covering a different piece. I'm really hoping that you'll join us for some other weeks. Some are going to be easier than this, some are going to be on this level, and some are going to be harder. So see you next week. Thank you so much for watching, and let's get to some questions. All right. So, first question here. We've got some good ones today. So if you still have one, please leave it in the comments so that I might be able to get to it. Okay, so what's another one of your favorite pieces by Agustín Barrios? Good question. I've got a ton. Right off the top of my head, probably one of my favorites is Una limosna por el amor de Dios, which means alms for the love of God. If you search Ultimo Tremolo, the last tremolo, or if you search alms, A-L-M-S, for the love of God, that one is amazing. Sueño en la Floresta, it's like a dream in the forest. Those are both tremolo pieces of different styles than La Catedral, of any of the movements. Then he's got these Opus 8 number 4, I think, what was it? He's got some waltzes, so if you just look up Barrios waltz, they're amazing, and I love those. He's got, Las Abejas, one of my favorites, starts out. It's like kind of modeled after the Flight of the Bumblebee. It starts out like this. It's really cool. And then there's, there's a lot of really great music by Barrios. Now I'm blanking on the spot. But yeah, the waltz is Una limosna, Sueño en la Floresta. Yeah, there's a lot of great music by Barrios. Okay, another question here. Regarding the rest stroke, your finger often rests on the next note to play. How do you rest on the string and then play the rested on string with your next finger? Great question. At the start of this, we have fret 14 on the high E played with A, and then open B played with M, but the A is resting on the B string. Great question. Okay, so that can be a little confusing. Like I said, at first we're going to just play it without resting on the next string, so without rest stroke, but free stroke, just to get used to this. But to answer your question, right after you rest on the next string, it doesn't stay resting there. I guess that's what's a little misleading about the name rest stroke. But you pull through the string, and then by the time your M finger plays that open B, it's already come off. And it's kind of for practical reasons. When you rest through the string, once you've made it through and it's touched the next string, the direction of the string's already been pushed, it's already been released, there's no purpose to leaving it down on the next string after that. The rest stroke is kind of just to get that direction going, and then once you've gone through the string and it's resting on the next, there's no purpose to keep it there. So when I take it off, it's almost immediately after touching it. Maybe you can see up close. I don't know how up close you can see, but if I rest through that string, like with an open E, after it rests here, it comes off immediately, like this. So maybe you could practice doing that. Just plucking through the string and then coming off of it, and alternating with that open B that comes next, right? This. Except now you just do this. Rest, pluck with M, rest, pluck with M, rest, pluck with M. Okay? Give that a try. That's a great question though. Do you have any exercises I can practice every day to help me with volume dynamics? Okay, so controlling dynamics is what I assume you mean, and one of my favorite things to do is do your scale practice and your dynamic practice at the same time. So whatever scale you know, whether it's chromatic, whether you don't even know a scale, it doesn't matter so much, even if you just do things like shapes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you practice starting really quiet, like almost where you can't hear if I'm playing or not. And you grow all the way to like a fortissimo, as loud as you can play, right? And try to distribute evenly. And then do the same thing on the way back. But the key to this is starting so quiet that it's like whispering. You're not even sure if you're playing that quietly. Because whenever we're trying to expand our boundaries on something, we have to exaggerate, right? We have to start really quiet. Because sometimes those are the most meaningful notes, right? They're super quiet ones. So try that. And then also do, so it's very intuitive to get louder as the note goes higher, right? Very intuitive. It just makes sense to do that a lot of times. But it's really important to practice counterintuitively too, because that's not always what the music calls for. And if the music is getting quieter as it ascends, you don't want to be in the habit of always getting louder as you ascend. So the other way around is start a scale. This is just C major, 2 octaves. And start it really loud and get quiet, like this. And then get louder as you come back down all the way to fortissimo. Okay? So again, it's loud and getting quieter. A whisper volume by the time you get to the top. Okay? So I really recommend that type of practice. So let me go look back at your question. Exercise your practice really to help with volume and dynamics. Yeah, every exercise you do, practice at different volume levels and dynamics, no matter what it is. Maybe you're going through something in my course on jam play, like one of the exercises or arpeggios that we do. Don't practice at it just like this. Maybe jump every other one. And then try keeping it really quiet for a little while. Because, you know, our hands are using so much more force when we're going loud, and it's really hard to control our hands in both of those situations and really adequately and accurately get out the music that we're trying to produce. A lot of times what we end up doing is just snapping back into some sort of normal volume that we're kind of used to playing at, and that makes the music really boring. So that's seriously a great question. I hope I answered it for you. Okay, another question here. The artificial harmonics, they're played 12 frets away from the bar? Yes, great question. Probably wasn't clear because we started to run out of time there at the end. We have that B minor. Then 12 frets above is exactly here at that 19th fret. So 7 plus 12 is 19, right? 19, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That's how you can find it. And you want to play, you want to do the harmonic right on the metal part, the actual bar, not, or sorry, the actual fret, not the center. If you do the center, it'll sound like this. You hear the note still, but it's not clear. See, now once I go over the bar, you get a much clearer sound. So yeah, everywhere that you do harmonics is going to be 12 frets above. For instance, if I have my left hand off the string and I do a harmonic on the 12th fret, it works because I'm using an open string, right? Right here is kind of where my finger would be if there was a 0th fret here. But as soon as I move to this 1st fret, I'm going to be aiming for the 13th. But it's important to note that there's other harmonics that you can pick that aren't 12 frets in. For instance, you have the 5th fret harmonic, which is an octave above that. So you can do it the 5th fret, you can do it the 7th, you can do it the 9th, you can even do 4th. The 4th fret and the 9th fret are actually the same. And there's all sorts of harmonics in between. It's harder to get on the 1st string, so I'll show you here. So all along there you have harmonics, but the loudest ones are the 12th, the 5th, the 7th, and the 9th. And you can do the 4th fret one there too. So hopefully that clears up. The 12th fret ones are always an octave away, so that's what we were doing there. We were doing a B minor chord, this is a B on top, and we're tapping where the B would be if we were to play it fretted, just right on the fret. Okay, so unless there are any other questions that pop up here, I think that might have been the last one. Really great questions today. Definitely check out the other music by Barrios. I think you'll really enjoy it. La Catedral is really such a gem in his repertoire, and definitely look at the 2nd and 3rd movements as well. They're beautiful, really beautiful, definitely contrasting. So thank you so much for watching. Tune in next week. It'll be a different piece every single week. This has been a lot of fun so far, and thanks again. I'll see you next week.